Gray light spread over the Atlantic as the USS England cut through low swells. Salt mist drifted across the deck, coating railings, boots, and the thin metal plates of the Hedgehog launcher bolted near the bow. The ship moved with a steady rhythm, neither in a hurry nor relaxed, just holding a line drawn days earlier by orders passed from officers who barely slept. Men leaned against bulkheads or crouched by coiled ropes, watching the horizon without speaking. A faint hum from the engines blended with the slap of water against steel. Inside the pilot house, Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton studied the chart table. Circles marked previous sightings. Lines traced the suspected path of an enemy submarine group, believed to be moving east. A pencil rested near his hand, though he hadn't written anything in minutes. He listened to the steps outside and the distant clatter of metal against metal as the launcher crew checked bolts. He looked up when the door swung open. His executive officer, Lieutenant Gresham, held a folder that had been folded and refolded so many times the edges were rounded. "Intercept report from Comsa Westback," Gresham said. "If the subgroup keeps its last course, we're in their lane." Pendleton tapped the chart with 2 fingers. Here. Pendleton closed the folder and set it aside. "Bring the sonar team up. I want continuous sweeps." Gresham nodded and left. Pendleton stayed a moment longer, eyes fixed on the map. He whispered something under his breath, a habit he had learned from old skippers. Not a prayer, not a hope, just a reminder that the ocean never gave anything freely. On the open deck, Ensign Carver tightened the strap on the Hedgehog MK launcher. The device looked simple from a distance, only a cluster of tubes arranged in a forward-angled pattern. But up close it showed the complexity of a weapon designed for one purpose. 6 dozen small projectiles waited inside the metal crates stacked nearby, each one armed to explode only after contact. A bosun's mate walked by and tapped the launcher with the back of his knuckles. "If sonar finds anything, this thing's gonna run hot today." Carver didn't smile. "If sonar finds anything, we're already late." Both men turned as a wire transmission echoed from the bridge speakers. "All stations to readiness. Maintain full listening watch." Carver exhaled and moved to his post. Far away, across an ocean and a continent, Eisenhower met with his commanders in a stone-lined room in southern England. A large map covered one wall. Thick arrows pointed inland through France, and stacks of reports covered the table. Outside, trucks rolled across wet roads as convoys moved toward departure points for a campaign that had already reshaped everything. Inside the room, conversation stopped when Eisenhower stepped forward. His uniform showed the weight of weeks without pause. He looked over the map, then at the men gathered around him. "We adjust nothing," he said. "Hold the momentum. Every hour counts." A colonel handed him a message confirming German reinforcements shifting toward the eastern lines. Eisenhower read it, folded it once, and set it down. "Europe is changing faster than they can react," he said. "If we keep pressure on every front, they won't recover." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He placed both hands on the table and looked at the arrows that represented thousands of men moving through hedgerows, rivers, and bombed-out towns. He breathed slowly, as if he could feel the entire continent leaning forward with him. Then he straightened, nodded to his staff, and walked out. Decisions made in that room moved across oceans, reaching ships and crews who would never see these maps but would bear the weight of them. Back in the Pacific, the USS England felt the tension tightening like rope. The early sun slid behind a thin bank of clouds. Light dimmed over the waves. At the sonar station, Petty Officer Flynn adjusted the headset and pressed the receiver closer to his ear. He listened to the ocean's constant noise, the low rumble of the ship itself, the faint clicks of marine life, the distant hum of nothing in particular. Then something shifted. A new sound, small but rhythmic, tapped inside the headphones. Flynn froze. He turned the dial a millimeter to the right. The tapping grew sharper. He called out without taking his eyes from the screen. "Bridge. Sonar is a contact. Bearing 183. Faint but consistent." Voices rose on the bridge. Feet moved fast. A bell rang once. Pendleton appeared behind Flynn. "How solid?" Flynn ran the sweep again. Definite mechanical pattern. Screw rotation. Single source. Pendleton leaned over the screen. Range. Not precise yet. Pendleton looked at Gresham. Bring us toward the bearing. Quiet approach. The USS England shifted course. The crew felt the change instantly. The subtle left roll, the change of engine tone, the long pause that followed as the ship began to stalk something unseen. Carver stood beside the launcher, gripping the metal railing. He watched crewmen move into position, each one silent and focused. A man near the loading crate wiped his palms on his trousers once, then stood ready. The ocean stretched out ahead, flat and wide, giving no hint of anything beneath it. From a bridge, a voice sounded over the intercom. All hands, prepare for attack run. Carver's jaw tightened. Flynn listened through the headset as the tapping grew clearer. The screw's rotation was steady, unhurried. The enemy was moving at cruising speed, unaware of the ship sliding toward it. Flynn spoke into the microphone. Bearing steady. Contact confirmed. Depth estimated at medium level. Pendleton nodded with a slow breath. He looked toward the bow, though he couldn't see the launcher from here. He spoke quietly. We take the shot on the first run. No circling. Gresham signaled the helm. The ship accelerated. Water split along the bow. Spray lifted in thin sheets. Every man aboard knew the next minutes would decide everything. Not only their hunt today, but the string of decisions that had brought them into these waters. A lookout shouted down from the mast, "See clear ahead!" Pendleton raised his arm. "Stand by the Hedgehog." Carver lifted his hand toward his crew. Flynn's voice cut through the intercom again, tighter now. Closing. Target dead ahead. Pendleton stared at the line of water before the ship. "Hold," he said. The engines roared. The deck trembled. "Hold," he repeated. The moment stretched until the air felt thin. Flynn's voice rose. "Passing over target in 3, 2." Pendleton lowered his hand. "Fire." Carver hit the release. The Hedgehog launcher exploded forward with a rapid sequence of sharp metallic coughs. Dozens of projectiles shot into the air, arcing over the bow before plunging into the water ahead. Each one disappeared into the sea with a clean, hollow splash. The ship raced on, engines thundering. No one spoke. They waited for the only sound that mattered, a detonation deep below. Seconds dragged. The ocean remained quiet. Men looked at one another without blinking. Then, somewhere far beneath the waves, the sea shook. A muffled explosion rolled upward, a low thud that vibrated to the hull, through the deck plates, through every hand gripping steel. Flynn pulled off his headset and looked up. Pendleton nodded once. Carver breathed out, shoulders dropping. The USS England kept moving forward, leaving behind the first mark of a hunt that was only beginning. Spray washed over the bow as the USS England resumed its patrol line. The vibration from explosion still clung to the steel, like a pulse slowly fading. Crewmen moved across the deck with steady steps, checking lines, securing hatches, keeping their minds focused on the next signal rather than the one that had already hit. Inside the pilot house, Pendleton stood by the windows. His gaze stayed fixed on the horizon, but his thoughts followed the path beneath the water. One submarine down meant the rest of the enemy group knew nothing yet. There was no radio burst, no chance for word to spread, unless a patrol aircraft saw the oil trail. The silence gave the ship a small opening, one they had to exploit before it vanished. Gresham approached with a clipboard. Sonar crew is rotating. Engine steady. Seas calm for the next hours. Pendleton nodded. Maintain speed. Keep sound profile low. Gresham adjusted a valve on the console. If the group keeps its pattern, number 2 should be ahead of us. Pendleton tapped the glass. We chase the pattern, not the guess. Below deck. Flynn replaced his headset and settled into the listening chair once more. The room was cramped, lit by a single red bulb hanging from a pipe overhead. 2 sailors leaned against the bulkhead, waiting to take over if needed, but none spoke. The constant hum from the receiver filled the space with a thin, unbroken tone. Flynn shifted the dial. Static swelled, then softened. The familiar underwater noise returned. Distant currents, faint clicks from small life forms, the soft rumble of the ship itself. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, breathing slowly. Minutes stretched. Crewmen passed outside the doorway. Boots clanged on metal steps. A pipe hissed somewhere deeper in the ship. Flynn kept listening. At the same time, far from the Pacific hunt, Eisenhower stepped into a field tent set up beside a makeshift runway in southern England. Generators hummed. Stacks of crates formed narrow corridors around the command area. Pilots stood around a table covered with reconnaissance photos from the previous night's flights over France. A major pointed to a cluster of dark smudges on one photo. Enemy armor moving north from the river line. At least 2 battalions. Eisenhower studied the image, then shifted to another showing bridges blown apart by Allied bombers. He set his thumb on the damaged crossing. They can't reinforce fast enough. If we keep mobility, we stretch their command thin. A captain nearby spoke quietly. Weather window closes tomorrow, sir. Eisenhower responded without hesitation. Then we move tonight. Officers exchanged looks. Decisions reached them like hammer strikes. They moved to prepare the orders. Eisenhower stepped outside for a moment. Cold air swept across the open field. He watched a line of vehicles heading toward the coast. Trucks packed with supplies, medics adjusting equipment, infantrymen staring forward through narrow windows. The war shifted with every mile those convoys traveled. And somewhere across the world, crews you would never meet were keeping entire ocean corridors safe for the flow of that war. He walked back into the tent. The USS England continued cutting its measured path. The sky darkened slightly as clouds thickened over the water. Wind picked up in small bursts that rippled along the waves but didn't trouble the ship. Carver and 2 sailors checked the Hedgehog launcher again. They tested the angle adjustment, tightened the bolts, and inspected the crates of projectiles stacked neatly beside the rail. No one wanted to lose a chance because of a loose latch or jammed tube. A lookout shouted from the mast, "Deck crew, incoming swell from starboard." Carver held the railing as the ship rose and dipped. The launcher groaned but held firm. "Good," Carver said quietly. "Better to know what'll shake before it matters." One sailor asked, "Think the last hit scared the others off?" Carver shook his head. "Subs don't scare off. They hide deeper. Or they wait." The man didn't reply. Flynn adjusted another dial. A soft pattern flickered across the display. A shape, then nothing. He shifted the knob again. A faint vibration pulsed through the receiver. Flynn straightened. He pressed the headphones tighter. The vibration repeated. Slow, uneven, not a screw, not marine noise. Something mechanical, but distorted as if hitting debris. He called out, "Bridge. Sonar has a weak anomaly. Possible damage vessel. Possible sub at depth." Pendleton picked up the receiver. "Location?" Flynn recalibrated. "Bearing 240. Low confidence. Could be underwater clutter." Pendleton looked at Gresham. "Bring us to bearing 240. Slow advance." The helm adjusted course. Flynn listened again. The vibration strengthened slightly, then faded. The pattern didn't match a clean-running submarine. It wavered, dragging like a device struggling against pressure. Flynn whispered to himself, "Come on, show yourself." The noise flickered once more. He spoke into the mic, pattern inconsistent, but mechanical. Could be a sub running silent and damaged. Pendleton ordered, "All hands stand by. Launch crew prepare, but hold position." Carver signaled his men. They took formation around the launcher, each motion practiced and steady. Minutes passed as the USS England moved toward the anomaly. A thin fog settled over the water, clinging low to the surface. Visibility shrank. The ship's bow cut a path through the mist like a blade. From the bridge, Pendleton watched the shifting gray ahead. "Keep lookout eyes sharp. They surface in conditions like this." A sailor with binoculars scanned left to right. Nothing on horizon. Nothing on wake. Another crewman approached Pendleton. "Sir, communications asking if we want to broadcast last contact hit." Pendleton shook his head. "No signals. We stay dark." Gresham glanced toward him. "Could lose the trail if it dives deeper." Pendleton replied, "Then we follow the only thing we can, the pattern." The ship pushed through the fog. Flynn heard the vibration again, stronger this time. It rose quickly, then dipped, like the struggling spin of machinery forced into motion. He recognized it instantly. Bridge, contact strengthening. Submarine likely ascending. Pendleton stepped forward. Range. Flynn adjusted the depth filter. Close. Very close. Pendleton looked toward the bow. Carver, prepare to fire on my signal. Carver raised his hand. Launcher ready. The ship accelerated slightly. Fog swirled around the bow, breaking into small spirals as the ship cleaved through it. The ocean ahead remained flat, calm, unbroken. Flynn spoke again, urgency sharpening his tone. Target rising. Passing medium depth, moving up fast. Pendleton braced himself against the railing. He's trying to surface. Gresham leaned over the chart, maybe to recharge or to spot us. Pendleton didn't answer. He stared straight ahead. Flynn's voice came again, louder now, crossing into shallow range. The ship shuddered. Something scraped beneath the hull, faint but real. Crewmen felt it through their boots. Carver whispered, "He's right under us." Pendleton lifted his hand. Fire. Carver pulled the release. The Hedgehog launcher fired in a rapid blast. Projectiles arced forward and vanished into the gray water. Men held the rails. The seconds stretched. No one moved. Then, a sharp explosion erupted beneath the surface, closer than the last. The deck jolted. Spray shot upward in a violent burst that shattered the fog around them. Flynn yanked off the headset. Pendleton steadied himself. Carver exhaled, but the sea did not settle. Bubbles rose in a wide circle ahead of the bow. The explosion had hit something, but something that had been rising toward them. Gresham stared at the widening boil of water. "Sir, that wasn't a deep hit." Pendleton replied quietly, "No, that one was almost at our feet." The USS England slowed. Men watched the churning water, waiting for whatever would come up from the depths, debris, oil, or something worse. The hunt was far from over. Steam drifted from the ship's funnel as the USS England reduced speed. The ocean ahead churned in a slow circle, foam spreading outward like the mark of something torn open below. Crewmen gathered along the rail, leaning forward without speaking. No debris surfaced. No oil slick widened. The sea remained disturbed but empty. Pendleton stepped closer to the bow rail. Flynn confirmed status. Flynn pressed the headphones tight and scanned the sweep. No screw rotation. No machinery. Nothing active. "Could be sinking," Gresham said. "Or waiting," Pendleton replied. He turned to the helmsman. "Bring us around for another pass." Slow orbit. The ship curved in a wide arc around the disturbed water. Fog shifted around the hull, drifting in and out of view like curtains drawn by an unseen hand. The Hedgehog launcher remained pointed forward, its empty tubes angled like spears waiting to be replaced. Carver oversaw the reloading. Sailors opened crates, lifted projectiles by the fins, and slid them carefully into the tubes. Metal clinks echoed across the deck. One sailor whispered, "Feels like it's staring at us from below." Carver didn't look up. Subs don't stare. They calculate. Flynn continued sweeping. The ocean noise remained flat, steady, unbroken. He adjusted filters, changed frequency bands, shifted gain. Still nothing. He looked toward the bridge speaker. "Sir, contact lost." No trace. Pendleton studied the water. A damaged sub wouldn't vanish this fast. Gresham pointed to the chart. If it dove steep, pressure could have crushed it. Pendleton responded, "But we'd see something. Anything." The ship completed its circle. The boil of foam softened into ripples, then into normal swells. Crewmen exchanged glances. Carver secured the last tube on the launcher, reloaded. Pendleton took a long breath. Resume patrol heading. Maintained sonar sweep. No assumptions. As the USS England returned to its track, tension settled over the crew. The earlier strike had been clean. The second hit was different. Too close, too abrupt, too quiet afterward. Rumors began to spread quietly across the deck. Maybe the explosion had forced the submarine deeper. Maybe it was sitting on the seabed, waiting to rise again. Maybe it had surfaced somewhere behind them. Flynn sat forward, refusing to lean back even for a minute. His eyes stayed locked on the screen, scanning for any sign. His headphones suddenly crackled with a faint rhythmic pulse. He stiffened. The pulse returned, slightly louder. He turned a dial fraction of an inch. The pattern resolved into a recognizable cadence. "Screw rotation detected," he said sharply. "Bearing 095. Fast." Pendleton moved instantly. Distance? Closing from long range. High speed. Gresham glanced at the chart. Different angle from the one we tracked earlier. Pendleton's jaw tensed. Another submarine. The ship surged forward. Water fanned out along the hull, leaving a frothing wake behind. The fog began to lift as the wind shifted, giving a broader view of the ocean ahead. Lookouts aimed binoculars in every direction. Sunlight began breaking through, slicing the mist into fading streaks. Carver and his men braced near the launcher. Flynn kept calling updates through the intercom. "Bearing steady, still closing, speed increasing." Gresham studied the readings. "He's running toward us." Pendleton didn't look away from the horizon. "No, he doesn't know we're here." Flynn's voice sharpened. Contact turning slightly, adjusting to deeper waterline. Pendleton lifted his hand. "Bring us across his path. Quiet until the strike." The helmsman turned the wheel. The ship angled into a new direction. Eisenhower walked across a stone corridor in an English estate chosen for temporary command. Footsteps of aides echoed behind him. A new set of reports waited on the table inside. Resistance activity in France rising, divisions repositioning, German communications showing strain. A general stepped forward. "Sir, we have a message from Naval Intelligence. Anti-sub operations in the Pacific reporting significant successes." Eisenhower scanned the summary. It mentioned only numbers, no names, no ships. He folded it and placed it on the table. "The oceans matter as much as the roads," he said. "If shipping lanes stay open, everything accelerates." Officers nodded. He returned to maps of Europe. Unaware that far across the world, a small ship was building a record that would ripple through naval strategy long after the war ended. The USS England approached the new contact. Flynn's voice grew more urgent. Target moving to deeper depth. Strong rotation. Engine stable. Pendleton leaned forward. "He's healthy, not damaged." Gresham added, "Which means he's not the one we hit." Pendleton didn't respond. He stepped out onto the deck, wind pulling at his coat. Carver straightened, waiting for the order that would come within seconds. "Range!" Pendleton shouted toward the pilot house. Flynn's voice echoed through the speaker. "Approaching launch window." Pendleton raised his arm. The ship aligned with the unseen target. The ocean ahead darkened slightly. Not visibly, not in a way anyone could point to, but in a way every man aboard felt. "Hold course," Pendleton said. The engines pulsed. The bow lifted over a swell. The moment tightened. Flynn called out, "Crossing over target." "Fire!" Carver slammed the release. The Hedgehog launcher spat another cloud of projectiles arcing into the sea. They vanished in a staggered series of splashes. Everyone braced. Seconds stretched. 1, 2, 3. Still no explosion. Flynn's voice hit the intercom. No detonation. A violent blast erupted behind the ship, shaking the stern so hard several men stumbled. Spray shot upward in a tall column, raining down across the deck. Gresham shouted. It passed under us before the strike. Pendleton grabbed the rail. "Hard turn. Bring us around." The ship heaved into a rapid left swing, wake spiraling behind it. Flynn tracked the sound. Target veering. Speed unchanged. Carver reloaded frantically with his crew, hands moving fast over metal fins and crates. Pendleton steadied himself and pointed forward. We ended on the next run. The USS England accelerated again, chasing the turning echo of the submarine below. Men tightened their grip on the rails. The ocean ahead stretched empty and wide, hiding the hunter they now pursued. Flynn kept the bearing locked. Carver's crew finished the reload. Pendleton watched the water with unblinking focus. The hunt had shifted. This one wasn't fleeing. This one was maneuvering. And the next minutes would determine who struck first. Engines roared to the hull as the USS England surged after the turning contact. Spray lifted from the bow in white arcs that shattered against the wind. The ship leaned hard into its new course, metal groaning as if bracing for impact. Flynn's voice came through the bridge speaker, sharp and constant. Bearing holding, target descending, adjusting speed. Pendleton stood at the forward rail, Colt whipping behind him. Gresham held the chart tight against the console. Carver and his team waited at the launcher, hands already chalked with dust from projectile fins. Flynn repeated, "Target turning again. He's drawing a loop." Gresham looked up. "He's trying to get behind us." Pendleton didn't move. "Keep straight." Matches turned only at the last second. The helmsman nodded, gripping the wheel. The ocean stretched wide and flat, but every swell felt like a signal. Every vibration inside the hull seemed louder than usual. The submarine below was no longer simply running. It was circling, adjusting, calculating. The ship cut across the water in a wide arc. Below deck, Flynn followed the shifting echo. The rotating pulse from the target grew stronger, then weaker, then strong again, flattening into a clean rhythm that revealed distance and direction in every beat. He leaned over Mike, contact moving fast. Consistent screw pattern. No damage. A sailor beside him whispered, "Why is he turning like that?" Flynn kept listening, trying to flank, or escape, or bait us. The sailor swallowed and stepped back. Flynn focused again. He tapped the mic bridge. He's rising slightly, probably adjusting trim. Pendleton heard the words through the speaker above him. His fingertips tightened along the rail. "Prepare for intercept," he called out. Carver lifted his hand in acknowledgement. The ship completed its arc. Waves slapped the hull in rhythmic bursts as the engines settled into position. Men along the deck leaned forward as if trying to see beneath the surface. The wind shifted sharply. Clouds overhead broke open just enough for sunlight to flash across the water. The reflection stretched in long streaks, then disappeared again as the clouds drifted back. Flynn spoke rapidly. "Bearing locked. Closing fast. Recommend launch on next overlap." Pendleton nodded. "Helm, bring us across his path." The wheel turned. The ship angled. Spray burst from the bow as it cut the new line. Carver shouted to his team, "Stand ready." The crew crouched around the launcher. Flynn counted down through the intercom. 50 yards, 40, 30. Pendleton lifted his arm and held it still. The ship rolled slightly on a swell. Flynn announced, "Overlap in 3-2. Pendleton swung his arm down. "Fire." Carver pulled the release. The Hedgehog roared again. Projectiles arced in a clean fan, striking the waves with rapid splashes that formed a half circle ahead of the bow. Every man listened. Seconds passed. Nothing. Then a muted thud echoed deep beneath the water, too soft to be a full strike. Gresham frowned. "Glancing hit?" Flynn answered quickly. "Target accelerating. Not damaged." Pendleton turned toward the helm. Full power. Stay on his tail. Engine surged. The bow lifted. The hunt sharpened. The USS England chased the submarine in a long, sweeping line across the ocean. No fog now, no cover, just broad daylight, and the widening trail of violence beneath the waves. Flynn's updates came like pulses. He's turning again. He's diving. He's rising. He's speeding to port. Correcting course. Still moving. Still running. Still alive. Carver's team reloaded at speed, sweat mixing with seawater as they lifted each projectile and locked into place. Metal clicked into alignment. Crates emptied. New ones arrived. The deckhands moved like parts of the same machine. Carver looked up at the bridge. "Ready again." Pendleton raised his hand. "Prepare for another strike." Flynn shouted, "Crossing over soon. Bearing tight, he's close." Pendleton stepped forward. "Hold steady." Wind tore across the deck. Gresham leaned over the console. "He's drawing us into his wake line." Pendleton shouted back, Doesn't matter. The crew braced. Flynn called out, "Launch window now." Pendleton signaled, "Fire." Carver slammed the lever. Another volley flew, another spread of splashes, another long silence. Then a blast surged upward, not directly beneath the ship, but close enough to rattle every bolt in the hull. The deck bucked. Men grabbed rails. Spray drenched the bow. Flynn nearly lost his headset. Gresham steadied himself. That was near his stern. Pendleton raised his voice over the wind. "Where's he going?" Flynn answered immediately. "Still moving, slower, pattern irregular, possible damage." Carver's men shouted with renewed energy and began reloading again. For the first time, the submarine below was losing rhythm. The ship angled again, rolling hard to port as the helmsman fought the sea. Flynn's breathing became faster as he pressed the headphones against his ears. The contact sound was shifting, wobbling, dragging, changing pitch. Each rotation told him something was wrong with the enemy's propeller shaft. He tapped the mic bridge. "He's wounded. Still running, but different." Pendleton stared ahead. "He knows we're on him now." Gresham adjusted the depth chart. "He'll try to break off." Pendleton responded, "He won't get the chance." The ship drove forward. Flynn tracked the bearing. Closing nearly aligned. Pendleton turned toward Carver. "One clean shot. That's all." Carver nodded once. "Ready." Pendleton raised his hand. Flynn's voice sharpened. "Launch in 5, 4, 3. The ship slid over a rising swell. Pendleton held his breath. 2, 1. Pendleton dropped his arm. "Fire." The deck shook as the Hedgehog erupted. The projectiles vanished beneath the surface. The ship held its course. Time stretched then. 1 second. 2, 3, 4. Then a detonation ripped through the water with a force greater than any before. A column of white spray blasted upward, towering above the bow. The deck heaved violently. Several men stumbled but caught themselves on the rails. The sea boiled ahead, churning in a violent ring. Flynn shouted over the intercom, "Direct hit." Carver exhaled hard, leaning against the launcher. Gresham gripped the console. That one broke something vital. Pendleton didn't look away from the rising spray. "Circle the area." The helmsman obeyed. As the ship swung around, pieces of debris surfaced, boards, fragments of metal, small objects tumbling in the foam. And then, slowly, oil rose to the surface, spreading across the water in a widening black sheet. Flynn spoke through the speaker. Quieter this time. Contact lost. No movement. No sound. Carver removed his helmet and looked at the water without blinking. Pendleton lowered his head slightly, letting the wind push the spray from his face. For a moment, the ship moved in complete silence. Then Pendleton spoke. We continued the patrol. The engines rumbled back to steady rhythm. The ship turned toward open ocean again. The men returned to their posts. But the hunt was not over. They had no idea what waited ahead. And in the next hours, the USS England would face a moment that would define its place in naval history. The ocean settled into long, steady waves. The USS England moved across the surface like a shadow searching for a place to rest. The crew leaned on rails, tools, and bulkheads, each man silent in his own way. No music, no laughter, just the sound of the ship breathing after 13 days of tension. Lieutenant Commander Walton stood near the bow, looking out. Salt clung to his uniform. His eyes followed the horizon without chasing anything. The hunt had ended. The water ahead looked empty, but nobody trusted emptiness anymore. "Sir." Lieutenant Pendleton approached, holding a clipboard he wasn't reading. "Orders from command. We're heading back to resupply." Walton nodded once. "Good." Neither moved. Pendleton looked out at the sea. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" Walton pressed a hand on the rail. Men aren't built to jump from silence to chaos and back again. Pendleton exhaled. Some of the crew, they still expect another contact. They sleep in shifts like we're still hunting. Walton didn't respond. The wind brushed past them, carrying only the faint smell of oil from the deck. Below, In the mess hall, sailors ate slowly. Chief sonar man, Lacey sat with his hands around a mug that had gone cold. Miller dropped onto the bench across from him. "You hear anything?" Miller asked. Lacey shook his head. "Nothing. Doesn't mean it's not there." Miller pushed the mug toward him. "We're clear. The captain wouldn't bring us off station if he wasn't sure." Lacey leaned back, eyes unfocused. 6 boats. In 13 days. Miller rubbed his forehead. Feels like a number someone else lived through. The door opened. A few sailors entered, their footsteps soft, as if loud sounds might bring the ocean's anger back. On deck, repairs continued. Bolts tightened, wiring checked, dents hammer flat. The Hedgehog launcher stood still, the steel plates dark from use. A mechanic ran a hand over its surface, stopping at the edges worn by recoil. He whispered, "You held together." The ship vibrated slightly as the engine shifted to a different rhythm. Walton walked toward the stern, observing each section of the vessel. He stepped into the radio room where Ensign Robard sat adjusting dials. "Anything from command?" Walton asked. Robards handed him a message. "Reports say enemy subs in this sector dropped off entirely." Walton raised an eyebrow. "Good for the fleet." Robards hesitated. "Sir, what we did, 6 submarines. It's already spreading. Other ships are talking." Walton placed the message down. The ocean doesn't care about stories. It only cares of returns. Robards nodded, unsure how to respond. Walton stepped out. As evening approached, the sky turned a dull gold. The crew gathered along the deck without being ordered, not for ceremony, just for the chance to stand under a quiet sky. Some leaned against the railing. Some sat cross-legged with their backs against the bulkhead. Others simply closed their eyes. Walton joined them. His boots stopped beside the Hedgehog. The metal caught the fading sunlight, turning its edges into thin lines of fire. He touched the casing. "No more tonight," he murmured. Pendleton approached, folding his hands behind his back. "You think command understands what 12 days like that do to a ship?" Walton kept his eyes on the horizon. "They understand results." Pendleton let the silence stretch. "And the men? What do we tell them now?" Walton considered the question. The ocean rolled beneath them, steady and slow. The war still raged far away, but in this moment, distance felt real. "We tell them the truth," Walton said. "We did our job, better than anyone thought possible. But the sea doesn't reward victory. It just lets you leave." Pendleton nodded once and stepped back. The intercom crackled. "All hands, prepare for night routine. Maintain course." Lights dimmed across the deck. One by one, the crew moved toward their stations. Voices stayed low. Laughter didn't return. Not yet. Inside the small chapel room, a few sailors sat on benches. No service, no chaplain, just a place carved out for quiet. A single lantern glowed against the bulkhead. Miller entered, removed his cap, and sat beside Lacey. "You think they'll send us back out?" Miller asked. Lacey looked at the lantern. "If they need us, they will. And if they don't..." Lacey breathed slowly. "Then maybe that's enough." Footsteps tapped outside. A bell sounded twice. Shift change. Later, the night settled full across the Pacific. Stars stretched overhead without clouds to hide them. Walton walked alone along the deck, listening to the hum of the engines below. He stopped near the stern, watching the water churn behind the ship into white trails. A sailor approached quietly. "Sir, some of the men were wondering if we'll talk about what happened. For the record..." Walton turned. "What would we say?" The sailor thought for a moment. That we were scared. That it was fast. That nobody expected it. Walton studied him. "Fear isn't failure. And speed doesn't change intent. We did what we had to do." The sailor nodded. "Thank you, sir." Walton looked back at the water. "Get some rest." The sailor left. The ship's wake glowed faintly under the moon, stretching behind them like a long memory slowly dissolving. As the night deepened, the crew finally began to breathe like men no longer waiting for an explosion. Boots loosened, shoulders lowered. Sleep came without being forced. In the radio room, Robards logged the final entry of the day. 6 enemy submarines neutralized. 0 losses. Crew fatigued but operational. Returning to base. He paused, then added one more line. The ocean is quiet tonight. Just before dawn, Walton stood at the bow again. The horizon brightened, revealing a thin, pale line of blue. Pendleton stepped beside him. "Sir," Pendleton said, "after all this, what do you think people will remember?" Walton kept his eyes on the rising light. "Not the names," he said. "Not the days. Maybe not even the number." Pendleton waited. "They'll remember that a small ship refused to disappear," Walton continued. "That's enough." The sun broke across the water, turning the surface into a path of gold leading straight ahead. The USS England followed that path without hesitation, engine steady, crew awake, the ocean finally letting them pass without resistance. The ship moved forward, leaving the long shadow of 13 days behind it. Quiet, unspoken, and unforgettable,